What is the imitation of images? Let's look back at the past from the present world. At this time, we are in the first stage. Photography and computers have not yet appeared. So we capture reality through our eyes, which function like the lens of a camera. The image will be transmitted to the brain as the central processor, commanding the hand to use tools to reproduce the image you see. When an image is reproduced, you will naturally compare the similarity between the reproduction and the original. Because similarity becomes a kind of appreciation word, a criterion to judge the skill. And it is also used to distinguish the original from the reproduction. Our first impression of the reproduction comes from the original. And the similarity becomes the link between the original and the reproduction. And also serves as a proof of the existence of the original. The advent of the mechanical age of reproduction transferred the role of the hand in the reproduction of images to the eye and to machinery. And the mode of image production became mechanized and industrialized, i.e. the birth of photography. The rapid reproduction of images by which, in Walter Benjamin's view, the authority of the artwork was greatly diminished, forcing art to change not only the way it was created, but also the way we see it. From the point of view of reproduction, Marshall Duchamp's fountain is an art form that directly copies and pastes objects produced in bulk. And this type of mass-produced artwork weakens the originality and uniqueness of the artwork. René Magritte's The Treachery of Images reminds us that the pipe in the painting is not a real pipe, but only a pictorial symbol. Whether reproduced by hand or mechanically, the image has gradually become detached from reality. Now turn our attention back to our most familiar computers. Open your browser and find a picture of an apple on the internet. Now you get an open source image from the internet, whose origin determines its properties, consisting of data and encoded information. You no longer wonder whose copy it is, no longer notice its resemblance to the original. Because they are detached from reality, become symbols and create another reality. When you read an image using computer graphics software, you can observe that the image is made up of many small colored dots by constantly zooming in on the image. In order to prove the authenticity of this phenomenon observed by naked eyes, I input the apple image into processing and re-imaged it by enlarging the dots, so that a fine and realistic apple image was transformed into a low fidelity, as well as a slightly crowded apple composed of dots. Then let me add some more instructions to processing, so that the dots are distributed in the interval where the brightness is less than the threshold of 200, which will result in a weird apple image. These two images generated by processing are completely virtualized and digitized, also completing the betrayal of reality and the replicability from the original. The concept of original work gradually disappears, and the so-called original manuscript is just a pile of numbers stored in the computer. And when it meets the software format that cannot be opened, it is just a pile of worthless mess. L did several sets of visual experiments to explore how virtual images mimic the capture of real objects, and go beyond replicability to reproduce themselves in a closed environment without any reference objects. If virtual images are allowed to imitate each other, will people still focus on the similarity between the original and the replica? Pixel points and cubes, as basic elements in images and 3D objects, are transformed and continued between them. making the similarity of the image presented by objects of different dimensions on a certain plane. To further understand the relationship between photography, real objects, and digital images, L used different filming methods to explore what information the camera captured, providing nutrients for the simulation of the virtual image. This lens is looking for and calculating an algorithm called depth, which can create a simulated distance for the imaging in the virtual space, reflecting the space of the image. During my research, I found that 3D photos can embody an interesting state between photography, reality, and digital imaging. The process of generating a digital image forces the digital image to be photo-dependent, requiring a full 360-degree shot of the object, which provides a breeding ground for the computer to replicate the image. I put the replicated object on my body, and I felt the coldness of the lens, as the camera was filming me from top to bottom, left to right. It had a consciousness that wanted to devour me, to see through me inside and out, to take me out of the real world in order to give birth to my virtual image. Looking at the model generated in the screen, another perfect imitation for the computer, I turned from initial surprise to disappointment. The similarity of the image made me marvel at the success of this experiment, but the empty eyes made me realize that he was not me. I looked at him on the screen and I wondered what our relationship was. I took this question into the film. He looks a lot like me, rotated in such a way that I can look at him closely. The crippled body has lines weaving through it, supporting the three-dimensional image. He wanders through the screen, seeming to be getting used to the image. Particles leaving imprints in the screen as his body moves. Reproducing and breeding, losing his reference. Becoming infinitely virtual, transforming into symbols. Finally cutting off the connection with reality.